After delay after delay after delay, after the Happy Meal toys have come and passed, and $180 million, wink wink, in shoots and reshoots, the next big film in the MCU is finally here. Captain America, Brave New World. I made sure to see it as soon as I could so I could be able to answer one question for the world. Is it worth watching in theaters? And I can now decidedly say that the answer is... not particularly. It's alright. Well, there we go. End of video. Make sure to like and subscribe and... Alright. I suppose I can go a little further into it than that. I'll save you from any spoilers, but if you've watched the trailers, there's honestly not a lot to spoil. Besides all the obvious reshoots, added-in subplots, and a story without any real surprises or risks, the movie's actually okay. On an MCU scale of The Marvels to Winter Soldier, I'd put it at about a Shang-Chi and a half. It's not as boring as The Eternals, or as infuriating as Iron Man 3. But it doesn't really do or say anything that you haven't already seen as either an MCU or casual movie fan. For a movie so obviously recut and stitched together, it's surprisingly straightforward and coherent. The plot focuses mainly on President Ross and Sam Wilson and the ways they get along and butt heads. But the movie never really lets things get too serious between them. There's a couple scenes here and there, but there isn't really a lot of tension between the two, sadly, which is a shame because they both are pretty good at playing it when they allow them to. One of the key themes of the original 3 Captain America films is Steve taking a stand against tyranny, whether abroad, at home, or even against friends. With this movie, you don't really get any of that. Sam doesn't really take a stand about much of anything, really. I mean, he doesn't just do as he's told, but the whole stand and tell the world to move when you know you're right feeling of Steve Rogers isn't really here at all. Which is fine, Sam Wilson isn't Steve, he's his own character. But the movie never really gives us a strong sense of what a Sam Wilson Captain America means. What he really brings to the table that's different, besides, his wings and winning smile. There's a couple lines about it here and there, but if I was going to make this movie, that would probably be the main thing I'd do, since you're trying to sell him as Captain America, not as a placeholder until Chris Evans eventually is offered enough money to return. As Captain America, Sam looks absolutely ridiculous. Classic Captain America has a shield, a mask, and a costume. Sam Wilson's version has a shield, a full helmet, wings, tech drones, vibranium powers, and a sidekick who dresses exactly like him. I'd say it's the most over-designed and powered character we've seen in the MCU to this point. He really looks like if you tossed 3 action figures into a blender, pulled them out, and decided to make a $180 million movie out of them. Not a good business plan. With Ross, the main arc of his character has to do with his rage, which the movie tries to really hammer in as an aspect of the character, going all the way back into the past. However, when you actually go back and watch his character in previous movies, he may be a self-righteous asshole, but he's actually relatively calm for the crazy-ass stuff he's dealing with. As a president, we don't really get a sense of what got Ross elected or why the people like him, which is a shame, because I would love to have seen what kinds of things people vote about in a world as crazy as the MCU. As sad as it is to not have William Hurt in the role anymore, Harrison Ford does a great job, as he always does. I mean, he's Harrison bleeping Ford. However, no mustache on Ross is just stupid. Come on, what's the point, man? And the one flashback scene where you see him with it, he looks great. So, I don't know why they did that. Bullcrap. Sam's new sidekick, Falcon Jr., doesn't really stand out at all. And though he serves as what could charitably be called as comic relief throughout the movie, he doesn't ever really get annoying in the ways that other spunky sidekick characters can. Honestly, you kind of just forget he's even there. Especially when trying to fill in the wings of Anthony Mackie himself, who was one of the best sidekicks in the entire MCU through his sheer likability and presence. A main reason that I think a lot of people are annoyed that he's even being Captain America when he was so goddamn good as the Falcon. In my opinion, the highlights of the movie are Giancarlo Esposito as Sidewinder and the movie's other main villain. Everyone knows who that other villain is, and Marvel hasn't kept it quiet or anything. They've basically just said it out loud multiple times. But the trailers didn't show him, and the movie acts all coy about who he is for the first chunk of it, so as a non-spoiler purist, I won't go into him. But I enjoyed how he played the character, even if the material he had to work with wasn't anything groundbreaking. For Sidewinder, though, he's absolutely nothing like the comics. At all. But the actor is hamming it up so much, playing a cartoon supervillain, that I found it quite enjoyable. Some actors you just want to watch act, and though they also gave him very little to work with, he's doing what he can to bring some sense of fun to the role, and his scenes are the funnest ones to watch for me. Isaiah Bradley's done fine and well. His arc and role is pretty interesting, but if you didn't watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you'll have no idea who this character is, or why you should give a crap about him. A failure I think a few of the recent movies have had, like the Marvels and Multiverse of Madness. Having stuff in the shows cross over to the movies is fine and cool, but you shouldn't assume anyone's watched them in order to be invested in this movie or its characters. Even sequels usually know that rule. And for fans of Young Avengers out there who were hoping Patriot's story would be continued from Falcon and the Winter Soldier to lead him into Young Avengers or Champions or whatever they're calling it, he's not even in this movie. I'm sure a few of you out there assumed because Isaiah Bradley was in here that he would be involved, but he's not. He's not even referenced, so I think we can just assume that they're kicking the poor kid out of the MCU, and his little scenes from Falcon and the Winter Soldier were apparently just a waste of time. Well, how fun. Anyway. The low point character in the movie to me was Sabra. She's somehow even less like her comic counterpart than frickin' Sidewinder is, and less memorable even than Falcon Jr. She barely does anything, but is treated like a major character at the same time. It's kind of weird. You can really tell that whatever role she was originally meant to serve got gutted from the movie and reshoots for some reason. I wonder why. Anyways, I'm not usually one to get all whiny and complain about non-powered female characters fighting multiple buff guys at once, but come on. The fight choreography in this movie made it so obvious that these gentlemen were being accommodating to her. And the girl's like 2 feet tall and not even fighting with the same use their momentum against you style Black Widow used to use. Come on, help me out here, movie. The action throughout the whole movie is the same as this. You never really get lost in it. You always remember you're just watching a movie, especially compared to the god-tier action of the previous Captain America movies, which had some of the best action, if not the best action, in the entire MCU. So, the bar is quite high when you put that name on the title for action, and this movie did not deliver. The CGI sequences are better than some of the crappier ones in the MCU, but the hand-to-hand stuff, nothing special. Now, setting up a Captain America movie in the modern day where Cap faces off against the literal president of the United States is going to piss some people off, whether it had released last year or this year. Everyone knows the country's divided and yada yada yada, all that crap you're sick of. I don't know why they would have chosen a plot that's probably going to be divisive no matter what you do back when they first conceived this movie, but they did, and now they're stuck with it, even as both Disney and Marvel are clearly trying to step their foot out of political topics that they dove headfirst into. Whatever it was, there was clearly an original movie in here that was gutted and left on the cutting room floor in a desperate attempt not to offend anyone of any sensibility and instead just make a good old-fashioned action movie. You get very brief glimpses here and there of what that original movie's themes and plots might have been, but only in blink and you'll miss it lines and moments. What we have instead is basically just a straightforward superhero action movie about characters, and not really any politics at all for a movie that's pretty much about the president dealing with an international conflict. Now, as much as I personally hate hijacking established franchises for fill-in-the-blank topical, political, or social messaging, I also feel this movie would have been a little more interesting with whatever story they were originally trying to tell, instead of this relatively inoffensive movie that we got in the end. I'm not saying it would have been better. I think it would have been significantly worse, but it would have given me something to think about, even if it had annoyed the hell out of me. With this movie, you're not really going to be getting a lot to think about when you leave the theater. Another thing is that in the comics, Sam Wilson is quite outspoken when he's Captain America about many political issues, even though they're in a superhero world. In this movie, though, Sam Wilson is lips zipped. We don't really know his opinion on much of anything at all. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because the MCU Falcon really didn't talk about that stuff that much. You know he had feelings on it because he followed Sam against the government and all that, but he wasn't the kind of outspoken character who's always talking about politics. Why Sam is working alongside General Ross is referenced in the movie, and I actually think it's one of the better lines of the movie. Like a lot of little lines throughout the movie that I think were probably rewritten later and then added in, there is an interesting movie in the reshoot version as well, but they don't really have time to explore any of those concepts any more than they had time to explore anything from the previous movie. So instead, you don't get the same kind of Frankenstein mess that you get with a lot of stuff that's reshot, because they do clearly pick a narrative and follow that. But because they had to reshoot it in, you don't get to see it fully explored. And I think that's quite a shame, because I would have been interested in that version too. A lot of stuff that they did have in Falcon and the Winter Soldier that people disagreed with heavily, that you would assume have continued into this movie, were completely absent from the movie. There was no weird apologizing for terrorists who blow people up. They just call them terrorists and then they beat them up, as, most movie heroes do. There was sympathizing with the villain characters, but only with the humanity aspects of them, not with what their actual actions were. Those were completely condemned. And any of the little America's racist dog whistles throughout the entire show, completely absent from this movie, to a point where it's almost ridiculous, because you would think that a lot of people would be saying something about, this guy taking in the role of this guy. No bullcrap about Sam Wilson not being able to get a bank loan or cops pulling guns on him or any of that kind of stuff. So if that kind of stuff annoyed you in that show, it's not in the movie. If you found that kind of stuff interesting in the show, it's not in the movie. So, depending on what kind of viewer you are and what kind of thing you're looking for out of Sam Wilson as Captain America, you're not really going to get it. However, what I can say about this film is that it is, in fact, a movie. Compared to another reshot hatchet job like the Marvels that has no clear story or themes, this movie actually did a pretty admirable job of cobbling together whatever the original movie was with the new scenes they'd filmed to erase that movie and make a coherent and relatively logical story with a few character arcs and overarching ideas. There's nothing super remarkable, but it's a step up from a lot of the confused, unprofessionally edited slop they've been churning out across the last couple MCU phases. Is it a good movie? Not really. Is it a bad movie? No, it's fine. My review is that if it was on TV, I wouldn't change the channel and tell a commercial. If you just want to see the shield passed off to Sam and see him serve as Captain America, you'll likely find it serviceable. A better job than Falcon and the Winter Soldier did of giving you that story, at least. Though you don't get a strong sense of what the American public thinks of Sam as Cap or how much of a role he plays as a symbol of America, you do get a sense of what he's been doing the last few years and that whoever holds the shield of Cap is still considered an icon. However, if you loved the first 3 Captain America movies and are hoping for these same gravitas and kick-ass action sequences, you're likely going to find this movie pretty goddamn lacking. As much as I would not complain about it as an MCU movie, this movie does not deserve to carry the title Captain America and all of the quality assurance that's come with that across the years. Of all the MCU movies, Captain America is one that's been pretty consistently awesome throughout all of them. Even if it cheats by putting in a bunch of characters, it still keeps him at the core of the story and the types of themes of freedom and individuality that Captain America represents at the core of the movie. This one, not really. As I kind of touched on, the real main problem in the movie is that Sam Wilson never distinguishes himself as Captain America. He's got wings, he's got vibranium cheating armor, and he kind of talks to people, but you don't really get a sense of what he is like as Cap. It's more like watching a Falcon sequel. I feel like I just watched a movie starring the Falcon, not a movie starring Sam Wilson as Captain America. Now, that's not necessarily bad because I like Sam Wilson I like the Falcon. I like that character in the MCU. But if you're going to make him Captain America, you should make that movie. Otherwise, make a Falcon spin-off movie that nobody would see as well. Because I would go see that one at least, and I'd probably be a little more forgiving on it than something that had the name Captain America in the title. But here's what really matters to people who are probably listening to this video. Does it tie into the overall story of the MCU? Is this a must-see if you don't care about a movie's quality and all that boring crap, and you just don't want to miss out on the next big MCU stepping stone? Well, not really. You get some plot threads from long ago MCU movies tied up a bit, which is cool. You get introduced to a few characters that may or not appear going forward, some of which I don't care if I ever see again, some of which I'd be curious to see if they use. But this isn't like Guardians of the Galaxy introducing the Power Stone, Gamora, and Thanos, or even that super desperate scene at the end of the Marvels introducing the MCU Beast and other universes. I feel like they realize that not a lot of people are actually even going to see this movie, and wisely chose to not put anything in it that would make it mandatory viewing and alienate even more people from feeling like they've watched enough to justify seeing the next Avengers movie. All in all, if you're a big MCU fan, definitely give this movie a watch. You get enough stuff to keep you engaged and entertained, enough continuity stuff to keep you interested, and you get to see the plot thread from the end of Endgame continued forward, even if it's not anything spectacular. Which is fine. Not everything needs to be an A+. If you are just a casual MCU fan who just kind of watches whichever ones look interesting, you just skip this one. If you want to catch it on streaming someday, go for it, but otherwise it doesn't really matter to anything, and you're not going to miss anything when you go watch Avengers. If you're just an action movie fan and you don't care about the MCU at all, just F it. You don't got to see this movie at all, and you're just going to be confused by half of it. And also to say, what the hell are you even doing watching this video all the way through? Welcome. Give this channel a subscribe if for God knows what reason you like listening to me talk about things you have no context for. The more the merrier. You don't got to know what I'm talking about to be part of the club. And there you go. Bare bones, spoiler-free review. The movie is okay. I know a lot of channels will say, spoiler free, and then spoil every single thing in the movie but the last 10 minutes. I hate that. Instead, I'll just offer you vague feelings on the movie and say, trust me, brah. I'll do a more spoiler-filled analysis at some point in the future. There's a lot to be said about the details of the movie, especially if you're into the superheroes or the MCU in general. I'm very, very curious to see what the general public thinks and how well this movie does. If it's a record-setting bomb, I've got a few thoughts on why. If it somehow makes $1 billion, I'll be incredibly shocked. There were like 10 people in my theater. A ranking of this movie's characters by adaptational accuracy video coming soon as well. Until then, as Captain America always says, you have to do better, Senator.